Have new cards ruined Magic? Let's go for a little history lesson and find out. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video. And today I've been asked to play with Painter Grindstone Combo, specifically a Boros version. And as I was kind of putting together my initial thoughts for this video, I realized that it might be really interesting to take a look and see how the last maybe like 8 years of Magic printings have gone and impacted Painter, because the deck has really changed a lot from how many people might remember it back on like the Star City Games coverage circuit. So let's go back to like 2018, prior to the release of Modern Horizons 1, which is kind of a tipping point in Fire design, where I think the Painter deck list starts to change a lot. So this is a Painter combo deck list from 2018 from a major SCG event. This was a top 16 list by Jack Kitchen. I think this was in Baltimore, if memory serves. And Painter's Servant combo used to almost always be red-white because the card quality wasn't there for you to be a monocolored deck list. At the time, to have a chance versus Ant, which was probably more popular than the Epic Storm at that time, and other combo decks, you needed Aethersworn Canonist in game 1. And the deck had to go and run Enlightened Tutor, which is a card I basically never want to play again, but I'm sure I will be forced to play again many times on my channel. Tutors to the top of library rather than hand really don't see a lot of play in Legacy, with the big exception being Personal Tutor in Doomsday, because Doomsday is just a singular card that you just need every single game in order to win the game. But probably the biggest conceptual difference between the decks then and now is that the decks used to run Imperial Recruiter, which has all but disappeared from the face of Legacy for reasons that we're going to talk about in a minute. But I think the biggest thing that I want you to see in looking at this deck list is that old Painter decks were combo deck lists, like, period. You could, in theory, win a game with Smuggler's Copter by attacking for 3 in the air a whole bunch of times. You know, that's something that Delver does, but you're not really the best at removing opposing blockers. And sometimes you would see some cool Imperial Recruiter silver bullets or something like that. You know, your Magnus of the Moon sort of stuff. And occasionally you saw some real spicy narrow cards out of the sideboard like this one. But now let's fast forward a few years worth of printings. So this is Matthew's Boros Painter deck list. And conceptually, this deck has changed a lot, with the biggest like mental shift being this is a deck that has a combo finish in it, not a deck that has to win the game every time with combo. Fable of the Mirrorbreaker is kind of glue that holds together decks that look like this one with red mana and Ancient Tomb. And you can just do something like copy a Fury a couple of times and easily take over a fair matchup. Urza Saga just does Urza Saga things and singularly wins game if you just happen to play a couple other artifacts. And there are also new powerful additions to the deck list, like 4th Aerlingas, that can just take over the game. Oh, my Ancient Tomb mana now just became 2/2/2 red knights with Trample and Haste. And one of the biggest pieces of evidence that, like, we're not just an all-in combo deck anymore is we're not even playing 4 Grindstones. The advent of Urza's Saga means that you have more access to Grindstone than ever, so you don't necessarily have to play the full playset. For a long time, I was a really big fan of like just jam 4 Grindstones anyway, like 4 Grindstones and 4 Urza Sagas, plus the like Engineers and Welders to get your Painter Servants back and just get your opponents dead. But now that the deck is using the combo as a part of its game plan, it makes sense that we fully shifted off of those Grindstone packages. And if we kind of look at the number of, we're going to say air quotes, new printings in this deck list, I don't think were around back then either. Like, the deck at its core has changed so much over the last few years of Magic. And sort of like how Delver and blue control decks will absorb the best new things that are in their colors, or even switch colors to do that, this deck is doing the same thing. Now, within this like current legacy format that we have exactly right now, I do really like the white removal. There's a lot of big creatures around, your Murktide Regents, your Uros, but you also just want efficient 1-mana answers to cards like Namesticker Goblin and Broadside Bombardiers, which, by the way, is probably a card that you could play in Painter. Just food for thought, planting that little seed out there. And Urza Saga also means that you can actually gain some life back of your own if you have some decent sized creatures. And, a Shadow Spear on a Fury is not to be underestimated. So let's see how this kind of current iteration of Painter feels in today's Legacy metagame, which is overwhelmingly fast. Again, Namesticker Goblin is absolutely everywhere right now. But if you decide you like what you see on screen today and you need to order anything, check out Cool Stuff Inc. and use promo code ThrabenU to save 5% off on your next order. Let's battle. All right. I'm a little nervous here. My opponent has mulliganed to 5. My opening hand is okay, but a little bit awkward. I am going to lead on Urza Saga with the hopes that I can pressure my opponent with some construct tokens early, and then shift into a somewhat fuck. We're playing against Oops All Spells. And I'm just going to confirm I don't have Game 1 Graveyard Hate. Oh, no, I do. Sort by mana value. I have Soul Guide Lantern. Okay. So I have something that I am working towards. I think it's too slow. I think a lot of times my opponent kills me on this next turn before this tutor gets to go off. Is playing Phyrexian Dragon Engine better or worse? So this is just 4 damage. Urza Saga is 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll just plan on making an Urza Saga token. But unfortunately, this game 1 is fully like, am I dead or not? I don't have the white mana available to even pretend to disrupt something. Oh, that's not black mana. So you're telling me there's a chance. I think we dodged a bullet on this one. Oh no, that's fine, right? Yeah, that's in theory fine. That was, however, the card that I was going to fetch out. We'll just grab a Mox Opal here. We'll play Mox Opal. This is 1 mana. Play this. Let's use the Mox. No, I don't need to use the Mox Opal mana. My opponent's not going to be getting rid of my stuff. This is obligatory. We're going to attack my opponent for 5. That brings them to 15. I can maybe kill them next turn. It probably takes 2 turns. All right, they're chilling. I did not draw a new artifact. Could always kill my opponent next turn. I think I'm just going to hold up some extra mana. This lets me hold up a Soul Guide Lantern activation and Swords to Plowshares at the same time. There's 12 of my opponent's life. And I think we got real lucky, folks. How's my sideboard hate? I have fairies, right? Ooh, I have a mix of fairies and surgicals. All right, we got some goodies. A Wild Cantor. So my opponent converts that into black mana. Uses that to Cabal Ritual. Now we're up to 4 for a Spy. There's the old Undercity Informer, which my opponent will then sacrifice, milling their library. Now let's see if there's any weird Trixies here. Seems like no. There could be like Memories Journey plus a Spirit Guide or something. Oh fuck, this draws. I just clicked the wrong button. I'm going to die of embarrassment. Alright, well, I just punted that game. Alright, so now my opponent gets to Cabal Therapy me. And then they'll easily have the win. They've got Dread Return for Thassa's Oracle showing. I'm just going to concede and not show them my hand. Welcome to playing on Magic Online. That's a mistake I never, ever, ever, ever make in paper. Alright, so I have some Graveyard Hate. I have Thorns, I have Pithing Needle. And to a lesser extent, Magus and Red Elemental Blast have some text, but I don't know that I'm interested in those. I don't really need Swords to Plowshares. That's going to become opposing Graveyard Hate. I don't really need Fury. Those will become Thorn of Amethyst. Pithing Needle can come in the spot where Ensnaring Bridge is. And I think my Urza Sagas are much more valuable, and Magus of the Moon would destroy those, so I don't think I'm going to try to cut my opponent off of mana that way. Oh, this is fine, but I think I just punted an unlosable game one. This doesn't do anything. We'll mulligan this one. This one is great. I'm going to keep this one, probably getting rid of Goblin Welder. And just being able to Thorn of Amethyst while I'm on the play is kind of a big deal. Okay, sorry, had a unexpected text message I had to answer, but everything's all good. Minus my punt, that was pretty bad. So Force of Vigor is the big thing that I'm going to have to watch out for from my opponent. Force of Vigor makes playing out Fable of the Mirrorbreaker a little weird. Goblin Engineer is also a little awkward right now, though. My opponent will just Force of Vigor at my end step and obliterate my stuff. I think I'm just going to play Fable, despite that awkwardness. Oh no, I'm not going to play Fable, because Thorn. JK. I will Goblin Engineer then. So, do I want the Soul Guide Lantern in graveyard, or the Grindstone? Let's put another Thorn in graveyard. Then I can just, like, hold up a red mana and turn a Thorn into a Thorn, if need be. I make this land drop. I think I am playing a Fable this turn. I could just play Painter. I think I'm going to go ahead and do this, though. Like, once this Goblin Shaman attacks once, and I can just kind of, like, hold a treasure to keep Thorn around forever while also continuing to play more spells, I think that's very good for me. Okay. Turn 1 Thorn steals that game, and obviously the game on the draw is harder. So my opponent is not going to cast the Thassa's Oracle, they're going to bring it back from their graveyard, so this Pyroblast doesn't actually really do anything. I'm going to go ahead and ship this one, I think. I would really like a fairy on the draw, which I do have. I'm going to keep this pitching one of the blasts, I think. Alright, my opponent did mold a 4. Now, their 4-card hand can attempt kills surprisingly quickly. So we'll see what happens. Sure. This is 3 mana. 4 mana off a Spirit Guide. There's a Spy. So let's look for weird stuff. There is a Memory's Journey, but my opponent has no mana floating. So let's discard Fairy, take out Thassa's Oracle, and Dread Return. Wait, they have multiple Dread Returns and multiple Thassa's Oracles? That was unexpected. Yeah, I just punted 2 games. Or is this the revealed zone, and now this is the graveyard? Okay, no, I'm not. I'm not a crazy person. Okay. Oh yeah, this is fine. So my opponent's goal here is to just produce enough power that they can aggro me out in 3 attack steps with Memory's Journey, which shouldn't happen through... I guess I'm going to lose the Goblin Engineers, actually. Okay, so there's another Fairy, which is cool. So let's discard Fairy. Not my own graveyard. Where's Memory's Journey? I will... no, get rid of my own graveyard. I don't care that. I'll take out Memory's Journey. and the other card doesn't matter. They got like an Undercity Informer or something. So now my opponent has lost the ability to go and just put cards back in their library, which was their out. So we win that one. GG's. Not well played on my end. That game 1 misclick was absolutely brutal.
Today's video is sponsored by Eminence Gaming. They have run a ton of tournaments at this point, and you might know them from the competitive EDH scene, but their command tower software can be used for all sorts of different formats. It's really easy. You can even just give your players a QR code in order to get them all of their pairings and everything that they can need. I really love this software as a player, and you should talk to your stores about it. Consider using it. It's cool.
All right, I am going to keep this hand. This one is perfectly reasonable. In a vacuum, this is a hand that just go alt. All right. All right, you have my attention. All right. So, is this a combo deck list? This is like an Urza Saga target as a backup plan? Or is this like I want to brainstorm in my Sheoldred deck that's also mono black? I'm not exactly sure. It's spicy though. That's what I know for sure. I'm just going to play out my Grindstone and do the like turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 theoretical goldfish thing. If my opponent discards me and takes a painter, I just play a Goblin Welder or a Goblin Engineer and move on with my life. Okay, there's Urza Saga. Saw that coming from a mile away. But what's the payoff? That's what I want to know. The bridge is maybe okay. I don't think I play my Urza Saga yet. Everything is blue for blast purposes. And like, let's see if I'm dead or maybe you're dead. Another vault. It is a brainstone. Okay. Could be storm, could be not storm. Storm. LED. 4 mana. Beseech, maybe? Beseech. Sacking LED. Yeah, this is a Black Saga Storm variant that is playing Brainstone. My opponent has 2 Vault of Whispers, so they can presumably do gross things. That flashed on screen very quickly, but that is a guy as well, which allows my opponent to replay their stuff from graveyard and presumably just storm kill me. Yeah, so we had the turn 3 Goldfish, but my opponent also had the turn 3 Goldfish, and they were on the play. So, Tendrils? Tendrils. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Thorns in. Fairy in. Pithing Needle reasonable. Surgical actively good. Magus of the Moon not crazy. Shadow Spear for opposing Urza Saga. It's not crazy. I've got a delicate balance here of respecting my opponent's Urza Saga while also not fucking myself over. Because, like, Magus of the Moon shuts off a lot of my opponent's mana and their Urza Sagas, but blows up my Urza Saga, which tutor for Graveyard Hate. So I'm going to have to see where I land on that. I'm probably going to get rid of most of my removal here and assume that if we get into, like, an Urza Saga war, I end up on the better side of that. I think this is the stuff that always comes in, and I've mostly got that allotted for as of right now. And then the question is, like, do I go deeper on Magus? I don't think I want to do that. I think my Urza Sagas have too much value. I think I'm happy with this. No, absolutely not. This hand goes pretty fast. I'm gonna keep this one. Let's maybe just put back Goblin Welder here. So I'm going to lead on Urza Saga to work towards tutoring. We're going to Spirit Guide everybody. Oh god, what happened to that card for a second there? That was wild. Okay. Everybody's blue for the purposes of my red elemental blasts. I am working towards either a combo kill or the ability to disrupt my opponent's graveyard, whichever one I feel is more viable. I'm hoping to just kill my opponent. That is, like, usually the plan. White? Oh, okay. Just random color. I was about to say, like, if I'm about to fucking get Swords to Plowshared, I'm gonna riot. Wonder how many Brainstones my opponent is playing. That is a Grindstone. Well, I don't need to play that. I'll just attack my opponent for 1. Hit him. They're at 17. This is their shot. This is where they can combo off, and I can't stop them. Okay. What is that? Oh, it's a Cabal Therapy. Everything just looks a little different because of the painter. That's a Wishclaw Talisman. So, am I dead? Mana is currently a bottleneck. My opponent has 2 mana. Could get like a Dark Ritual and then Brainstone? Or I guess even better, get an LED, activate Brainstone. It leaves them with 3 mana. Doesn't seem like that quite works. But it is what they're going for. Alright, there it is. It is a Feed the Swarm. So they're just going to destroy my painter? Sure. So, I have an Urza Saga token, and then a couple paths forward here. So if I activate Wishclaw Talisman with Urza Saga, I can play a painter with Ancient Tomb, and then not have enough to Grindstone. So I think I'm going to plan on just killing my opponent in a fair way here. So let's get a Soul Guide Lantern. I'm going to take probably the LED out of their graveyard. I'll drop Plateau. I'll play Grindstone. This is an attack for 5, followed by an attack for 10, and my opponent is Hellbent. And, assuming I click on the card correctly, I can exile my opponent's graveyard to stop a Beseech for Gaia's Will baseline, which I don't think kills anyway. So, about the only thing I can do differently here is consider playing a couple of Magus of the Moons when I'm on the draw, as just a way to, like, shut off my opponent's mana. I could do those over, like, 4th, Dragon Engine. I think I want to keep the Ensnaring Bridge around in case, like, Urza Saga nonsense happens, since I have boarded out most of my removal. I'm not really the most excited about Magus of the Moon. I think I'm just going to whack submit. The issue about Magus of the Moon is that, like, my opponent just... Oh, fuck. Okay. Yeah, this is fine. Anyway, the issue with Magus of the Moon is that my opponent is like a Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual deck, so as long as they have an artifact mana to get the initial black source, they can do a lot of work. You may Thoughtseize me. Oh, my opponent took a Fable. This is probably an indication that they are going to try to play a fair game of Magic against me, rather than an unfair one. Do I have multiple fetch lands in here? I do. I just haven't drawn them yet. Okay. Another vault. I'll just take my draw. Okay, the graveyard is fucking covered, folks. We're ready. That's an old school swamp. I remember when those were standard legal. Anyone else's back hurt? Alright, so they're going to continue to take the Fables. Graveyard's off. I have to respond with a fetch here. Drop a Plateau. My opponent probably just Pithing Needles Urza Saga. They could Pithing Needle Fairy. Cutting off Saga's weird though, because that, like, it's symmetrical. Alright, they do name Saga. As I draw another Saga. Classic. I have to make land drops here, so I'm going to continue to play these. It just doesn't feel good. Maybe my opponent plays an Urborg, huh? Then I can cast fairies. Yes. Opponent weirdly floated in mana there. Burning Wish. That is a Peer into the Abyss. That's a way to win without involving the graveyard into the equation. I'll float mana with that Urza Saga. I can Pithing Needle Wishclaw Talisman. I think I'm just going to get a Grindstone. And my goal here is to work towards top decking a Painter and being able to kill my opponent. Note that I did have the line of, or no, I guess I don't have the line of get Lotus Petal white yet. I believe that I am interested in grindstoning my opponent because I do have multiple surgical extractions. That's a Goblin Welder. Not interested in that. So float mana with this. Let's get Pithing Needle. We're going to shut off Wishclaw Talisman. Black mana Surgical. Let's take Infernal Tutor out of my opponent's deck. And another one out of hand. Alright, is there anything spicy in here that I need to be aware of? One, Feed the Swarm. This match is going to be close enough that I should take a picture. Alright, so my opponent's hand is kind of blanks for now. It has 2 Beseech. There's not another Burning Wish. The Gaia's Will in hand is awkward. Their Urza Sagas are off, their Talismans are off. Life's definitely a little tough for my opponent right now. I guess I, in theory, want to just mill the Tendrils. I think I'd rather get a Goblin Welder into play for shenanigans, though. Because then I can weld my own stuff into play and, like, grindstone myself to get a Painter. So this represents Rainstone, Chrome Box, Haywire Might. Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Float mana. I don't get to kill this turn ever. Most of the mana I can have is 4, and I need 5 to kill. So let's just grab Soul Guide Lantern. I mean, I guess I still have these fairies too. They're not Pithing Needled. Okay, I'll grab Lotus Petal then. Yeah. So 2 mana. Painter's Servant. Everything is blue. I guess I can sacrifice Lotus Petal. Oh yeah, I have a kill. So make mana. Activate Goblin Welder. Choose target Pithing Needle. Turn it into target Lotus Petal. 2. And 3. Yeah, there is the GG's in chat. Alright, did not miss on board lethal. Good game. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, and I personally keep all of my deck lists for every format on this site. I love that I can go and sort them by types and tags if I need to. There's a lot of different viewing options. It can give you some math about your mana symbol, your curve, and you can even playtest and do sample opening hands with it. Check this site out if you haven't before. It's awesome. Alright, I have kept my opening hand here, which is like maybe not ideal, but has a lot of upside. So if I am playing against a blue deck, I just have double blasts that can efficiently trade with my opponent's blue cards. You know, every time you trade your 1 mana card for your opponent's 7 mana Murktide Regent, you know, that feels good. Alternatively, I just get like Fable of the Mirror Breaker as my generic glue to fix this hand and get artifacts into play so Goblin Welder gets turned on. And if my opponent's playing a creature deck, I've got Fury. That's an interesting draw. Goblin Welder is on sort of the anemic beatdown plan for a little while. And then hopefully he turns into an MVP later on in this matchup. Looks like my opponent's forcing. Pitching a Dress Down. So we're playing against a control deck of some kind. This land drop might be very informative. Not particularly. Just blue-white X deck as of right now. When we start seeing like green mana, we get clued in for beans. If we start seeing red mana, we start thinking about this. Oh, a Wasteland is rough. Mox Opal, not good right now. So I'm going to hyper aggressively trade red elemental blasts for things like ponders right now, if I can. I am in a terrible position. I can draw out of it relatively quickly, but life's bad. Life's worse if my opponent is playing like a blue-white Stifle Knot deck list and they just like end of turn dress down into a Dreadnought that murders me. All right, so we're thinking beans. And then we'll figure out specifics from there as my opponent plays more cards. I'm not getting to use these blasts, so I'm just passing the turn. Next turn I have to play out Mox Opal as to not discard. We just play and draw go. Murky? It's murky. So let's attempt Red Elemental Blast, and I can attempt it again on my turn if this one does not work. Actual factual counterspell. Opponent has one card left. How savage would it be if that one card is Daze? JK, it's not savage anymore. Actually, I Swords to Plowshares this instead, right? And then I can save Pyroblast for another card. My opponent's life total doesn't matter that much right now. And if my opponent wastelands me and I lose access to this, I don't want swords stranded in my hand. Nah. I don't know what my opponent has in hand, but it's not particularly good. So everything's blue? I could choose not blue, because then my opponent's Force of Wills get better. Like they can Force of Will pitching a land. I think everything's red to make my Fury better. I think it's a moot choice, because like my opponent's last card is somewhat likely to be another card like Swords to Plowshares. If it is, they're not using it immediately. A Prismatic Ending, sure. So I had the idea right, just the timing of the spell wrong. I'd love to draw a land and get this going, but it's not in the cards. So we're chilling. That is an Uro, which I think I'm just going to Swords to Plowshares immediately and not let my opponent get another card off of it as it comes back later. My opponent still gets good value off of it. And now I have to keep in mind that Mystic Sanctuary is a card that can be in my opponent's deck. It doesn't have to be. It can. Grindstone's not great. I'm going to play it out. Like, I want to respect my artifact count for Mox Opal. I have to respect hardcast Force of Will. That said, YOLO? X is 2. They're in play. Will they connect? Okay. I am the pretty princess. And I get to start drawing some extra cards. The big fear now is that my opponent plays some flash creature, you know, like an Endurance, and then gets to go and become the Monarch. That's the worry. So, game could get a little weird. I'm going to keep sending in with my creatures. Opponent's at 23. For Metalcraft purposes, I am actually going to cast an Ensnaring Bridge. The Ensnaring Bridge is a little weird with, like, Monarch, but I want to be able to hardcast a Fury, if that's a thing that I need to do. Ooh, my opponent is taking out the Ensnaring Bridge. That occurs. My opponent kind of knows what they're working towards. My Mox Opal also gets turned off when that happens, which is, like, not the greatest for me. Awkward. I'm going to go ahead and play a Goblin Engineer here. I don't have a Painter in Graveyard. However, I am kind of interested in doing this. I think I'm still going to just get the Painter, though. And then I'll pass the turn, drawing an extra card. Okay, I'm chilling. Got a red Elemental Blast to take out a large creature like Murktide Regent if it gets played. Leyline Binding. Sure. Takes out Engineer. I've got another one. This is no big deal. I'm still clocking for 4 a turn. So, like, That's good. I have 3 white cards left in my whole deck. I think I'm just going to get another basic here. Make a land drop. I'll do my normal attack for 4. Opponent drops to 15. I'm just playing Goblin Engineer. I think this is just very frustrating utility for my opponent to have to deal with. And I'm going to add a Soul Guide Lantern to the pile of things that I can fish out of my graveyard if need be. That way my opponent can't, say 2-turn in Uro into play. But we've got some movement now. Opponent is just on Tundras and Trops despite being a Leyland Binding deck. Ooh, hey, there's that Wasteland that I played around. Sure. So I lose my Ancient Tomb. And then if I'd like, I can nuke my opponent's graveyard. I don't think I need to do that immediately. I'm going to play out Lotus Petal because that turns on Mox Opal. I'm going to attack for 4. Just with the usual suspects here. Opponent goes to 10. I think I am comfortable. There's no sorcery speed restriction or anything, right? Yeah, there's not. I think I'm comfortable throwing a Fable of the Mirrorbreaker into play. Yeah, sure. That's not what this game is about. I'll just keep taking more cards. Phyrexian Dragon Engine isn't exactly a great draw, but I'm not sure that that matters. So we haven't seen Beans yet. We also haven't seen more colors yet. A Murktide Regent. I'll just let that resolve and then untap and Red Elemental Blast it. Get another land drop as well. I have 5 mana. I can also just attempt a Painter thing with 1 piece of interaction as backup. I can also just fight over the Murktide Regent and represent Painter nonsense afterwards. Let's do that. Like so. I don't think my opponent can fight over this. So I will just attack for 4. I'm getting serious Splinter Twin energy right now, in that I have the ability to combo kill my opponent, but I think I can just kill my opponent without doing that. The 1, 2, 3 activate Grindstone +1 to bring Painter into play. I am not interested in playing out Goblin Welder then. And Urza Saga. Also, how many cards have I drawn off this? This is turn 15. Alright, my opponent surrenders. My opponent is very clearly base Bant control. But I forget the names of the triomes. Whatever. There's probably a Grixis one in there to round things out. Anyway, Magus of the Moon is cool. And I can play Magus of the Moon on my own terms. It can just be a game-ending card versus my opponent's greedy mana base. But if I am playing an Urza Saga game, I can just choose to not play it, and that's going to be perfectly fine. I think I'm interested in Red Elemental Blast. I don't think I'm going to do something like Surgical for Uro. It's on the table. I don't think I'm going to do it. So what I don't know is, what do I take out? Because it feels like my cards are just good. Phyrexian Dragon Engine wasn't great that game because I just have the Monarch, but in general, that is a very powerful thing to be able to do against a control deck. Fury's probably expendable. That gets me the first 2 copies of Magus of the Moon. I maybe don't need all 8 Welder effects. Ensnaring Bridge is not that safe versus my opponent's exile-based removal. I'm going to maybe chop that, and then I need 2 cuts. 2 Welders, 2 Engineers, question mark, question mark, question mark. Maybe 2 Welders. I don't think I'm going down Swords. Swords feels valuable. I could go down the singular Mox Opal. I think that's reasonable too. Alright. Respectfully, fuck your lands. So, I don't think I just jam a Magus on turn 1. I think I wait and do it on turn 2 around days, which my opponent has shown me. And if my opponent like taps out and uses some mana, and it like becomes less likely that they can just take out my Magus with a removal spell in response, like that's cool too. I could even wait longer, which I believe I am going to do. This is just going to be a basic mountain. Cast Lotus Petal, and we are going to play Fair Magic until I resolve a Magus of the Moon that kills my opponent. Like, the Fable is worth a card, like actual factual counterspell. Okay. So my opponent has double days. I'll pay. Oh no, that was just how much do I value the Lotus Petal? Understood. So then we'll see how my opponent handles this turn cycle. Ooh, I lose City? Oh, it's just an Uro. Like, that's fine. I'm also not getting Wastelanded, which is kind of a big deal. Okay. You have Swords. You have Prismatic Ending. Okay. I can do some discarding of cards. I will do so. I think I'm not interested in Swords. And I'm a little on the fence about some of the other stuff. How to sequence this turn for the purposes of days is a little weird. I think since I pitched Swords, this is the card that I play first. I just take out that Uro. Then I go and make a basic land drop. That costs me a life. I don't get Wastelanded if Magus gets countered. Magus does not get countered. And we just auto-win the matchup. We're now 3-0. I don't often keep hands that don't have either of my deck's colors. But when I do, hands are pretty damn good. Don't Doomsday me? That doesn't matter. That doesn't get to take Urza Saga. I unfortunately don't have red mana to do something like Pyroblast, a brainstorm or manipulation spell. Pyroblast can technically stop Athas's Oracle, but Cavern of Souls is a card that exists. Not that this is guaranteed to be Doomsday. There's a lot of blue-black Gam decks running around some amount of Death's Shadow. I have lost the Grindstone. Fable doesn't do anything for me as a draw. I am currently in a game where I have basically 0 agency until my Urza's Saga stage 3 resolves. Yeah, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, this would be a great Pyroblast target, kind of regardless of what deck my opponent is playing. My opponent like knows my exact hand and now can brainstorm to sculpt their gameplay perfectly around it. And now we're going to get a follow-up cantrip to shuffle off an island. And we do see the shuffle. Okay, well. Game plan remains the same. New land drop and passing. Potentially good news for me. Definitely getting some weird vibes though, like my opponent is not taking immediate action. They may be a little further down the controlling spectrum than I'm expecting. Yeah. And Orcish Bowmasters, since they took that Grindstone early on, actually gets to ping and kill this token. All right. So I make a new Urza Saga token. My opponent's graveyard is potentially a resource that matters. I think I am just interested in Mox Opal, though. It's not mana now, but it represents red mana next turn. I can just sorcery speed, make a token, then I have, in theory, 3 artifacts. And then I can actually start deploying these pretty reasonable cards. Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, obviously notably worse versus onboard Orcish Bowmasters. The card draw punish is very much a real thing. There is a Murktide Regent, so I had considered just preemptively nuking my opponent's graveyard, but the Pyroblast, in theory, stops this. So, here we go. We are just going to fetch a basic. I don't want to get wastelanded. My opponent knows that I have this Pyroblast, so here's to hoping that this works. Otherwise, it's just... fuck. There's a Force of Negation. So... Now we're going to have to get a little saucier. I need to resolve a Goblin Welder now, so that next turn I can weld in an Ensnaring Bridge. My opponent just pitched a Daze, so this is somewhat unlikely to be dazed, but that doesn't mean there's 0 chance of it being dazed. And I'm just going to do a quick check-in. My Shadow Spear is in my sideboard, not my main deck. Oh, that's so bad. That's so incredibly rough. Now I can't just immediately Ensnaring Bridge this turn. Soul Guide Lantern as the draw. Petal, Opal, 1 Grindstone remain. These can be 4/4s. These can be 5/5s. It's not lethal. I don't have a flying blocker. Yeah, I don't have the game 1 Shadow Spear. Let's just confirm that. Yeah, I don't. I think that's lights out for me then. GG's. Alright, so we are playing against a probably like Bug Beans mid-range deck with some tempo elements like Daze. I want that Shadow Spear. I probably want Magus of the Moon as a primary way to just end the game. Pithing Needle is worth considering. Fury is worth considering. I'm not excited about either. With my opponent's flash creatures, I don't know that I'm interested in 4th Aerlingas. Most of the rest of the cards here are reasonable, and I just kind of have to decide what ratios of things I want. Welder as an X1, I am probably just going to try to completely cut from my deck list and make it so that Orcish Bowmasters by itself doesn't kill any of my creatures. This is 6 cards that gets me back to 60. I don't know that I want a billion Furies. It's a little weird to board in Pithing Needle when, as the game goes very long, I'm hoping to resolve a Magus of the Moon. Like, Pithing Needle is for Wasteland, and Magus of the Moon is an alternative path to victory, so I don't think I'm playing Needle. I have a hand of Magic the Gathering cards that I am not excited about, but I also don't think is really worth mulliganing. Like, I have a valid 1-drop play, I have a valid 2-drop play, I have a backup 2-drop play, and then a game-ending Haymaker, assuming I get 1 more mana of some kind. The hand overall becomes just fine, with one of my biggest decisions being, do I counter something like a turn 1 Ponder if my opponent fires one off? I don't mind a Lotus Petal. That allows me to play cards around Daze. I am going to just fetch a basic here. I do not currently want to be Wastelanded. Grab Matching Mountains. I think I am interested in playing an early Painter's Servant and making life a little bit awkward for my opponent. Everything's blue. I'm going to pass the turn. If my opponent does something like fires off a Fatal Push on this, I can just Pyroblast their land in response, but I'm not going to open myself up to a blowout and waste this Pyroblast. I am also not just attacking with Painter's Servant. I don't want to attack into Orcish Bowmasters if I can help it. This represents a Grindstone. That's fine. Now I can attack with Painter's Servant because a mid-combat Orcish Bowmasters to ping and double block isn't on the table anymore. And in theory, I would love to use this Pyroblast to protect Magus of the Moon. So we're not going to go after Brainstorm, even though Brainstorm is such a good Magic card. Okay, and looks like we're just chilling. This is a little bit of an awkward draw. Let's keep playing this mid-range game, I guess, until it makes sense to not do so. And at this point, I would love to Pyroblast and destroy this basic island if I ever get the opportunity to do that, to just make this much stronger. That is a Fatal Push on Painter in response. This is an okay moment to fire off a Pyroblast and attempt to keep my Painter alive, because that makes the Goblin Engineer much more threatening. I also could just Pyroblast my opponent's basic island. But let's protect the Painter. I already, in theory, have a Grindstone coming. Alright, we're fighting. Are we Hydroblasting back? There's a lot of Hydroblast floating around in blue sideboards right now, since Namesticker Goblin is everywhere. Especially in leagues. We are Hydroblasting back. Did they? Oh, I see. They Hydroblasted the thing on the bottom of the stack, so my Pyroblast is still going to counter Fatal Push. And they decided that my Goblin Engineer is more valuable than Painter Servant. I can't see my opponent's hand, so I don't know the relative value of those cards at this time. My current plan is ride my Urza Saga value train for a little while and then slam Magus of the Moon. I may adjust that depending on what I draw. My opponent could have a Force of Will now. Okay, well, with another Urza Saga, I will probably just stay the course. So I can make a Saga token next turn, fetch a Mox Opal, and just continue to make Saga tokens. But I really want to just get Grindstone, so just little old love tap, skip playing the land drop, and pass. Sometimes I pivot off Grindstone. My opponent has left me with the Painter Servant, which means that they're not terrified of the combo. Ooh. That's why. Okay. I guess I don't need to respond to that immediately. Okay. And then there's a Brainstorm afterwards. Note that I can, just at some point, draw a Red Blast and get rid of Null Rod that way. No land drop. So my opponent's got spells in hand. And we'll see where my draw step takes us. I think I am staying the course on aggro here. And just trying to hit my opponent's face very hard. I could take one instant or sorcery out of their graveyard. I don't know that that matters. I am going to put a Grindstone in play, or if I do end up removing that Null Rod, just going to drop another Urza Saga into play. Hit my opponent for 6. I have a lot of power on board, and on my next turn, I can fetch and Swords to Plowshares a creature like Murktide Regent. If my opponent plays one of those in an attempt to stabilize the board. Witherbloom Command. They're going to get a land back and destroy my Grindstone. That occurs. Ooh, they can get a Wasteland. That's a huge get. Although they're just dead on board to me playing another artifact, right? Ooh, they're going for Delta, not Wasteland. There's still combat to be had. Yuri. Okay. So these are 5/5s. These represent lethal. Let's see what happens. I may end up slamming a post-combat Magus of the Moon. Things can get really weird here. Yeah, I imagine that this is black mana. It is Bowmasters. Sure. So they're going to ping my face. If I Swords, I put my opponent to 10. And then I'm still not doing lethal. I think I'm just going to let my opponent sponge the damage here. This is fine. Like, this keeps them alive, but has solved none of the problems. I think I'm going to pass the turn with the intention of playing Magus of the Moon one more turn cycle down the line. Against just about everything except Dress Down. Just prolonging the game and continuing to make Urza Saga tokens is incredibly strong. Now, my opponent has, say, exactly Dress Down Orcish Bowmasters or something like that. Things can get a little weird. Otherwise, this is a shit ton of pressure. I guess there's also some weird stuff like Hercule's Recall. At this point, I think I'll just grab like Soul Guide Lantern. And let's pull that Wasteland out of graveyard so a future Witherbloom command can't get it back. Drop a land. I think I am comfortable going to combat and swinging everything in and seeing what happens. Force of Vigor. Okay. That resolves. This means my opponent takes 6 damage and goes to 2. At this point, I'm going to attempt to slam Magus of the Moon. Some portion of the time this just gets dazed and like, that's that. I don't care if it happens. Force of Will. Itching Force of Will. 3 lethal bodies on board. And I have a removal spell for a potential blocker. Situation seems dire. Not unwinnable, but dire. It is possible that my opponent like strings together a set of, absolutely perfect cards and like Murktides into double Fatal Push or something like that and has a real chance at stabilizing. All 3 of these are lethal. I'm going to swing on in. I'm not going to Swords to Plowshares first. That is an Orcish Bowmasters. That can resolve. Opponent pings my face. Now, I think I can Swords the Murktide and give my opponent more life. I think that's okay. It's awkward. But I think keeping the Construct token body around is really important. Force of Will blue card, his last 2 cards get wrecked, Phil. Orcish Bowmasters gains my opponent 10 life while dealing me 1 damage. Pretty legit. Opponent's at 8. I'm fine taking 2 more to play a Fable. The looting ability is potentially relevant. My Fury is an okay card. Like, it's a 3/3 double striker. When I have the mana to easily pay for that, it's okay. The fact that I guess I should click on this, that this is going to grow each one of my Construct tokens by 1 is actually one of the better parts of that card right now. It seems like my opponent has yet another Murktide Regent. Oh fuck, okay. But my opponent has 1 mana open. I guess 1 mana open is enough right now. Sure. So dead, 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 living, living. I'm going to loot the sword. A Pyroblast. That's a thing. So this is about to nuke everything with CMC 1 or less. I can get some value here by drawing a card with Soul Guide Lantern and Pyroblasting Null Rod. I think I like it. It's a little weird. Now I could nuke my opponent's graveyard instead to prevent a Murktide Regent from coming into play. Let's do that. Alright. I lose this Lotus Petal, I can't use that mana for Fury. So my game plan is make Fury, copy Fury, and go from there. And hope that my decision to get rid of Null Rod over Up the Beanstalk was correct. Otherwise, I can just potentially just play post-combat Fury and then make a hasty copy 2 turns down the line. I don't know. Magic's hard. How many Bowmasters are in my opponent's exile zone, by the way? 2. Ooh, it is a Dress Down, which I'm guessing that my opponent is just using as an immediate cantrip. Layers mean that stuff's still blue. If you're interested, you can dig into the rules for how exactly it works, but essentially different effects are applied in a certain order every time so that Magic rules have some consistency. And that's what's happening. That is a Dismember on my Painter Servant, which I am okay with. Ooh, that's hella good. We're going to drop that. Yeah. Force of Will blue card? Not Force of Will blue card. So my opponent has shown me Dismember. How many Dismembers do they have? They can cantrip for it. But as soon as I hit my opponent a singular time, Dismember for 4 life is off the table. Okay, that's what you have to do. Reflection of Kiki Jiki is theoretical lethal. Surgical Extraction on Painter's Servant. Feels like you could have waited until my draw step to do that. Unless this is specifically trying to work towards a Murktide Regent. No, they're one short of that. This may just be them checking out my deck before they concede. Yeah, that is exactly what it was. So we're both low on time, but not to the point where I think a timeout is likely to occur. It felt like I had Murktide Regent pretty well under control. I maybe don't need Ensnaring Bridge. Like maybe I just want to be a little more threat dense with something like 4th Aerlingas or Fury. I think I like going up a threat or two. Let's go bridge out for 4th Aerlingas. Maybe get rid of the Miser's Spirit Guide for either another Fury or another 4th. 4th is just like weird in a Bowmaster world. I think I'm gonna go up 1 Fury. Am I supposed to just do this then? And these are just endgame 5 mana, 3/3 Double Strikers, just period. I don't mind it. I'm not sure if my approach is correct regarding 4th Aerlingas. Like, it's an insane card versus control, but Bowmasters is also Bowmasters, so this is one of those things where like raw number of reps. This is a snap keep. This hand's very good. And I have some wiggle room for how I choose to play it. I think I am always just starting on Mountain. Like, I think I am always playing City of Traders on turn 2, and it's just like, in what order am I jamming these 3 cards? I think Fable of the Mirrorbreaker is the first one that comes down. But we'll see. You have Life from the Loam. You have Up the Beanstalk. Sure. So this Wasteland makes me not want to play City of Traders. I'd almost rather just lose an Urza Saga to the Wasteland and then resolve a Magus a little later. To just like play this, bait the Wasteland with it, and use this to play Painter. Everything is blue. Pyroblast can, in theory, blow up something like Up the Beanstalk. I don't expect it. I don't expect to untap with this Painter. Like, I think my opponent is going to cast some removal spell or other. Yeah, that's fine. Now, my opponent can blow this for 0 to blow up Urza Saga. Like, that's a thing. So, what to do? Casting Magus of the Moon into Pernicious Deed is, like, definitely awkward. I could Pyroblast Pernicious Deed, play City of Traders, and use that to get a token out of my Urza Saga. Awkward. Just very, very, very awkward. Alright. I'm going to Pyroblast the Deed. And then things are going to get a little weird. Force of Vigor? Okay. That's not the best. I was fine trading with a Force of Will. That, though, is rough. Okay. Fuck, that's so bad. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay, that was a blowout. Fuck, okay. Play Lotus Petal. Now I get to resolve a red spell. I believe it is just Fable here. We get to do that around days, and then my opponent can decide whether or not they want to get rid of my Fable itself afterwards. Wow. Fuck, so I end this turn with no board, and my opponent just gets to untap with a safe Pernicious Deed. Absolute disaster. I'm gonna lose City of Traders to Wasteland too. And then I can lose Urza Saga to Pernicious Deed if my opponent realizes that that's a thing they can do. Okay, they can now get a Wasteland back as well. This next Urza Saga isn't even good. Fuck. I mean, I'll play it out. I have no other reasonable line. My opponent should just Wasteland this with this ability on the stack. Yeah, and they did. Alright. We're dead. It takes a little while for us to die. Unless my opponent just, like, has the absolute nuts and then follows it up with Murktide here. At which case, I will respectfully bow out. What a batshit insane hand from my opponent. To have Beanstalk, Deed, Force of Vigor, Force of Will, Murktide. That's insane. My opponent can also just Deed and blow up this artifact land and not give me a chance to get to 3 mana. Which I think would be very smart given a 8/8 clock in play. But they're not doing it. Oh, and a bonus clock. Sure. Show me Force of Negation that punishes me for playing this on this timing. Alright, they didn't have that. Still technically alive. If my opponent allows me to continue to play Magic the Gathering, these potentially just die to my opponent's Pernicious Deed. Not the end of the world. Lol, another Murktide Regent. Fuck you. Yeah. I take 5 damage in combat. I can play Magus of the Moon, take 3 or 4 damage in combat. This just complicates things. Playing Magus shuts off my Swords to Plowshares. I think I am not supposed to play a Magus. I think I pass the turn, try to draw a Plateau, Swords this, and then attempt to stabilize with Magus into Magus. Everything's just kind of moot. Sure. What is this? Oh, just another Bowmasters? Yeah, so if I played out a Magus as a blocker, I just get blown out even harder. So I died this turn instead of having one more turn. My opponent had the nuts that game. There was just very little I can do. Like, I know it's turn 8, but my opponent just had me at every angle. Alright, I'm keeping my hand here. We have a reasonable ability to play a combo-based game with some recursion, or I can play a mid-range game. Like, I am going to just have that flexibility. So we're probably playing against something in the general, elves ballpark here. Potentially like a Fiend Artisan / Reclaimer Elves deck. I am on track to Goldfish them on turn 3, but they just have Green Sun for Null Rod as a thing they are capable of doing. So we'll see if that happens. It does. Yeah. That's the power of being a Silver Bullet deck. Now I can at some point remove this. This is not the end of the world. I can get a Phyrexian Dragon Engine to just put a Double Striker into play that ends up drawing me some cards later, which is potentially just fine. Also shuts off my artifact lands, FYI. Yeah, I think I'm interested in this. I think Ensnaring Bridge is reasonable as well. But I just have another Goblin Engineer. Like, I can pick that up next turn. Set to take 3 damage in combat, which is going to drop me to 17. And we'll see how gross things get post-combat. Classic. Allosaurus Shepherd? Sure. Oh, I just naturally drew the Ensnaring Bridge. That's not bad. In respect of natural order for Hoof, I think I'm going to snag that. I'm going to grab a Plateau here. But I think I just don't want giant monsters attacking, especially since, like, this activated ability is potentially on the table. It's weird because my opponent can attack with smaller creatures and then activate this ability afterwards if they have something like a Gaia's Cradle that they can drop. Sure. Again, slightly awkward. Opponent's Gaia's Cradle produces approximately infinite mana. They don't have it. This is 4 mana. Feels like natural order. It is a Green Sun or Grist, which can take out my Engineer and many other future creatures as well. Grist also technically gives my opponent a way to win through an Ensnaring Bridge. Boy, I would love to draw a fucking Fury right about now. Let me tell you what. Play Urza Saga. I can kill this Grist. This is combat damage to a player specifically, right? Yes. I can cast this for X equals 1, attack the Grist, and play out Goblin Welder to work on going Hellbent to stop Ensnaring Bridge from getting me. I think I like that. Or sorry, like creatures from killing me. Go forth, Aerlingas. Yeah, I just don't want to introduce the Monarch to the game while Orcish Bowmasters is in play, and while my opponent has 4 creatures. Kill Grist. And then post-combat, we'll drop off a Goblin Welder. Here comes a Dryad Arbor. A land drop is scary from my opponent. Ooh. My opponent's going to let me trade bodies here. I think I have to take this out of play. This card is very, very, very spooky right now, because with 1 more mana, my opponent can just like attack and easily present lethal through an Ensnaring Bridge. So I'm in. I'm at 7. Things are spooky. One's got a flyer. This can attack for 1 damage per turn cycle. I'll just end up Swords to Plowsharing that after taking a little bit more damage, though. Like, I think I am just interested in play Painter's Servant. Everything becomes blue. The blasts can kill my opponent's Null Rod. And I'm going to hold up Swords. If my opponent doesn't do anything that requires me to interrupt with Swords, I will just Swords to Plowshares, Collector Oof, untap Grindstone Combo them. Another Dryad Arbor. It doesn't look like I'm in danger of my opponent going wide and killing me. So if my opponent attacks with everything, I block, take 2. That's fine. I don't need to stop this Collector Oof from attacking. Oh yeah, this is okay. Go to 6. Fantastic. End of turn. Swords to Plowshares, your Null Rod. And then I just grindstone my opponent's deck. My opponent sees the writing on the wall and does not show me their deck. Oof. Hello, copies of Fury. Hello, copies of Magus of the Moon. Pithing Needle and Shadow Spear are of secondary importance. They could end up going in. I'm not excited about either. Shutting off Fiend Artisan's ability to tutor for Collector Roof is pretty cool, though. So just in case you haven't played against this deck a lot, the reason that I'm boarding in a pile of Magus of the Moon is not to take them off of colored mana, it's to stop them from abusing Gaia's Cradle, which is a card that their deck is built around. I'm going to start by boarding out my Goblin Welders. I don't think I like them in a world of Bowmasters. I think similarly, I board out Phyrexian Dragon Engine. I'm less certain about that one. Like, when my opponent doesn't have Bowmasters, like a fair recurable draw 3 is reasonable, but I'm only doing it off of Engineer now. Soul Guide Lantern can shrink my opponent's Fiend Artisans. I don't know that that's necessary. I'm looking at boarding in 6, which gives me something approximately like this. 4th Aerlingas is probably a pile of dudes in a can, rather than something that introduces Monarch to the game. Like it's a defensive card rather than an offensive card. I think I want the blasts, because Painter Servant plus blast is more answers to oof. I could go down a mana source like a Spirit Guide or an Opal, but fast Magus or like that 1 extra mana to get to Fury could matter. I'm going to go down 1 copy of this card and not opt to board in either of those. This is a hand of Magic the Gathering TM cards. I don't know if I keep this one. Like, I have 2 lands that die to my own Magus of the Moon, and Magus of the Moon is my best plan for this hand. I can keep it with the intention of maybe pitching Magus to Fury on probably turn 2. Let's keep this. I think if I draw a land in 2 draws, this actually ends up being pretty reasonable. Like, Fury's very good here. I don't just fire it off on turn 1 willy-nilly, though. That is absolutely not what I'm looking for. Let's move that over here. It's actually most annoying for me if my opponent just like does nothing and holds up casting a flash creature. Okay, so what do? Probably just play Fable into my opponent's Orcish Bowmasters, but you know, is what it is. We'll take that 2/2. And I just assume that I don't loot with it next turn, and then that I wipe out 2 or 3 creatures with Fury. We'll see whether we're looking at Bowmasters or Endurance here. Endurance. So that makes the dream of cleaning up, you know, multiple creatures at the same time slightly less likely to happen. I can just nuke Endurance if I need to, but that doesn't really feel good. So my opponent does not have Natural Order in hand, otherwise they just like... I guess they could do a post-combat Natural Order and get 1 more point of damage, actually. JK. They could still have Natural Order. So we're hoping my opponent gets Atraxa here, because Atraxa is blue and can be Pyroblasted. Yes, thank you. Now, this Atraxa still draws some number of cards and will be very, very, very good. My opponent gets Dryad Arbor and Elvish Reclaimer, because they only just had 2 creature types there. All right. I am going to do some looting for sure. So let's go yes. I really need to continue to make land drops to play games of Magic. I don't really want to play Urza Saga. I think I have to give up on this like Magus of the Moon plan and try to find more removal, or alternatively set up Ensnaring Bridge. Okay. So, land drop, Pyroblast, kill Atraxa. So my opponent natural ordered for Elvish Reclaimer and drew a Dryad Arbor. Now, I can Fury and trade for a creature, while also dropping a Goblin Engineer into play. I guess I'll take my attack and accumulate my mana. I could just make an Urza Saga token. What is that, 17? What about that? Just make a 1/1, make a 2/2. They're both 3/3s, they're both 4/4s. Nuke Endurance now. Sure. Alright. Get out, bud. And then the hope is just that I can out mid-range my opponent. We'll see. A weird spot. I can potentially like try to wait on the Fury to copy it with Reflection of Kiki Jiki. I just don't think I get to wait that long. Elvish Reclaimer can safely attack. It's a 1/2 attacking into a 1/1. But my opponent might want to get a different land instead. I landed on no Shadow Spear, I believe. It's okay, I'm still at 15. Bowmasters would be annoying. Okay, dodged Bowmasters, at least in theory. My opponent could do it later. Force of Vigor? Force of Vigor. This is just objectively a mistake to let me untap with it, right? Because it just gives me 1 more Urza Saga token. And they hardcast that. I mean, I obviously take it. So when I attack, I will make a treasure token, meaning that these are 3/3s. So my attack is perfectly reasonable. Send them. 5 incoming damage. Opponent takes it. So now the next question is playing Goblin Engineer worth losing construct token size for? Let's say yes. I'm just going to go ahead and deploy this. I think putting Ensnaring Bridge into my graveyard. I think I just want to be able to lord that over my opponent as my out to another natural order producing a lot of power. And it will make me better versus single target removal spells on construct tokens. Oh, but my opponent might have the natural order this turn rather than later. That's sacking a Dryad Arbor, notably, making Elvish Reclaimer 1 bigger. This is not a lethal attack. These creatures don't trample in the future. If I make an Urza Saga token, I have 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have lethal on board? Yes. You hit me. I don't know that my opponent just did math. They need a Fatal Push or something to stay alive, or they're dead. Okay. So let me remath. I make a token. These are 3 3s. I make a construct. Those are 4 4s. 4, 8, 9, 10, 11 exactly. Yeah, show me a removal spell. I think I'm just going to put my opponent to the test here. I can play this one safer and just bring back Ensnaring Bridge, but I think my opponent missed the fact that lethal was on board and that just got excited and natural ordered. My read on the situation is correct, and we end up 4-1, only losing to the bug deck in a sequence of insane draws. So at the beginning of this video, I kind of, obviously not seriously, like asked, has modern Magic design like ruined a classic deck? Painter has been around for so long as a portion of Legacy, and I think the new printings have been awesome for this deck. Like the Painter Servant Grindstone Kill is still a portion of the deck list, but now this deck isn't forced into being a combo deck. It has such a good mid-range backup plan, which is really important in a world of Null Rods and Collector Oofs, and apparently Pernicious Deeds, as we saw. So yeah, I think even though some of these cards, like Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, are kind of like ubiquitous in Legacy, like you've seen them in control decks, as just kind of selection and mana fixing and maybe ways to copy things like Solitude. Seen it in initiative decks, Moon Prison decks, Red Stompy decks, Painter. And if you play other formats, you're probably sick of this card. But even though a lot of modern printings have found their way into this deck, I still think the play patterns of this deck are really interesting. You still have this flexibility to be kind of pre-boarded versus blue in game 1, while also being able to use these as Vindicates on permanents, assuming you can line it up with a Painter's Servant. And the deck has just powerful, objectively good cards, which is something a lot of the older iterations of the deck didn't have. When you look at a card like, say, Imperial Recruiter, that's slow. Decks like Death and Taxes play like Recruiter of the Guard because it's something that you can blink and reuse with like Flicker Wisps and Yorians. But a 3-mana tutor 2-hand creature is not the most exciting thing unless you can abuse it, which Painter didn't really do. And I really enjoy the play patterns of this deck. As long as you're a fan of taking free wins occasionally with Magus of the Moon, and as long as you can put up with this like Magus of the Moon Urza Saga awkwardness, and it is awkward, the deck is obviously powerful, and it took a ridiculous nut draw to kind of stop us and take us down. Now that said, we did have some longer matches today, and we did have to work for our wins, so like the wins aren't free. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed, and if you need to pick up any cards for your local Legacy events, check out Cool Stuff Inc. and use promo code ThrabenU to save 5% off on your next order. Folks, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and if you find yourself regularly watching, consider doing something to support me, like doing a donation deck list or becoming a YouTube member, and you also get early access to my videos. Alright, see ya!